All right, everybody, we are here at Titleist TPI, the Performance Institute, and we're here with brand new wedges, and I'm here with two legends of wedges. Kevin, I already messed up the last name. Please, Kevin.
Tassistro.
Aaron Dill. And I know, easy. I told Kevin I would mess it up, and I totally did. So, but we're here today and checking out brand new SM10 wedges. I know our golf forum has been just buzzing about SM10, what they could be, what they're going to be, what's going to be new. We're finally here. I just actually had the pleasure of hitting them outside on this amazing range, short game area. But SM10 is brand new. Kind of tell us a little bit of the story of where SM10 came from. I mean, SM9's now 2 years ago. It's crazy to think that they're 2 years old. But where does kind of inspiration for the next SM10 come from after a wedge that SM9 did really, really well? I mean, we saw them all over bags on tour, in amateur bags, and now all of a sudden we have to replace them. Where does that kind of inspiration start to start a new wedge?
Right, it comes from Aaron Dill and the feedback he gets.
Whatever I tell him.
Yeah, whatever you tell him. The feedback that he gets from the players on tour. Bob always says the best R&D is PGA Tour. What are they looking for? More of the same, something different. We have 23 grinds in SM9. How do we make those better? We have progressive CG. How do we make that better? We got score lines. How do we make those better? So it's working on versatility, distance control, and spin. How do we make each of those categories better?
Interesting. And the interesting thing, I think, is that, one, you look at this, and people are going to look at it and say, it doesn't look totally different than SM9. When you look at the cosmetics, all that, it looks like a Vokey wedge. Like, and that's what it is. But as you mentioned, there is a lot kind of under the hood, kind of exposed. You may have to look a little closely. The first thing I want to jump into is, one of the techie things is CG. Because I know a lot of wedges out there, there's a lot of talk about CG, and whether it's actually woods, irons, wedges. And we can talk about CG, but you guys it's not just a vertical CG. It's also right to left CG, or toe to heel,
correct,
as we say, or you guys have a little different name for it. But talk about CG and why it is so important in wedges to get the proper launch, spin, and performance out of a wedge.
Right. So we're looking at it all, right?
Yep.
X, Y, Z. Up, down, heel, toe, forward, back. They all have a purpose. Up, down is going to give you that flight. That's going to bring it down. Heel to toe affects ball flight left, right, not only in ball club dynamics, but also how the club rotates before impact. And then you got forward and back, how that club's going to react relative to the shaft axis. So, again, you say they don't look different, but they are different. They look like a Vokey, but what goes into it is more advanced.
Yep.
We're able to, we got ways that we move weight around. You got the top line. You got things with sole, you got the hosel, just kind of three pulleys that we look at to say, where do we want the CG to go? And we're making sure that the golfer, what they put into it is what they expect to get out of it, right? You don't want the wedge working against you. It's got to work with you. So moving that CG closer to the center for some of the lower lofts, and then as we progressively get higher in loft, it's going to be more heelward to allow some dynamic rotation to get the flight you want out of it.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting to have wedges that it's not just, oh, we've moved the CG here, and that affects, or that applies to all, every wedge, every loft, everything. That yes, the pitching wedge, the lob wedges, they're going to be different, and it's interesting that they do perform differently. And the one thing I kind of learned in my fitting today was lower launch, because I think a lot of us, when you look at a wedge, you look at, hey, it's 56 or 60 degrees or 52 degrees, whatever that number is. It's such a higher loft than your irons. You expect to hit it really high. But when you're talking to tour players and the best players in the world, that's not what they're trying to do with wedges necessarily. So talk a little bit about why are the best players in the world want to hit it flatter, lower, but still have a lot of spin? Like, what are they trying to do there?
So those two things go hand in hand, right? The lower the launch, the more spin you can produce, and the easier you hit your carry numbers. And if you ever go out to a PGA Tour event, LPGA, any event where you've got really good players, you're going to see a common flight theme, and that's lower, especially with the wedges, which are the highest lofted clubs in the bag, right? So we always, as we're fitting players, we talk about this sub-30 launch number. That's the important number we want to try and achieve. And we do that through fitting. We do that through sole testing and design. But we watch these players efficiently do it just through their technique. As designers of golf clubs, that's where Kevin comes in, and I say, Kevin, how do we make this easier for everybody else? He's incorporated technology to do exactly that. So as we're working with players, we're looking for these sub-30 launches. That's the best way, again, for us to get guys to hit those carry numbers easily, keep that spin up, but more importantly, manage and control their Pro V1 and Pro V1X into these tougher pin positions we're seeing at the highest level of golf.
Man, and I even was someone who I was out there during my fitting. I kind of found that I was trying to hit these really high lofted shots, much like when I went to my iron fitting, I needed to hit the ball higher. And I needed a steeper angle of descent to stop the ball and to have better distance control. And yes, found the exact opposite with the wedges, which was interesting because I always trying to loft my wedges in the air, and it was like, no, you don't need to do that. You can hit a more penetrating flight with a lot of spin and have better distance control. And it was something even I needed to get used to because it's a very different concept.
Well, if you go and you get fit and you look at those two launch windows, right? You look at your elite player window, which is that sub-30 number, you're going to see that ball flight through these lower windows and hit those numbers, and you're going to see that spin. It's extremely noticeable when it touches down on a green. Now, if you start getting above 30, that ball is going to not only come up short because it spends all of its energy going up, but you're also going to see this ball release a great deal more as soon as it touches down on the ground. And so when you talk to the best players in the world, male and female, they'll tell you the same thing. I need to send it low and get it to stop at those targets because they are in the most challenging locations on these greens, and I need to be able to control that ball at all times.
Yeah. And speaking of control, we talk about grooves. And we actually just had kind of a long discussion about grooves, and it was really interesting. I think as much as people may just look at grooves on a club and say, oh, they're grooves, and yeah, they produce a little spin, the amount of kind of the attention to detail that go into the grooves of these wedges is pretty intense. And you were kind of explaining how even the smallest details about the radius of each scoring line on there is really engineered to a crazy degree. But talk about a little bit about the wedges or the scoring lines and how you guys go kind of that next level to get them as close to, or stay legal, as close to staying legal as possible. Because it was pretty interesting to me that how far you went in terms of the radiuses and all that in those grooves.
Yeah, I mean we're trying to have everybody, not just the tour players, play their best golf. How do we do that with wedges? You just said we need spin.
Yep.
We get spin first through the grind, making sure you're fit right. The CG is right to help control that ball flight, and then spin finally is the last one to get there. We want to get as close to the USJ RNA maximum as we can. We are cutting these grooves as close as we can by inspecting them first. And we inspect them so they're not over, but we also inspect them so they're not under a certain limit too. We want to keep that tolerance nice and tight. But we're also cutting them on a flat surface. If we cut them on an unflat surface, we don't know what we're going to get. So the face is cut very flat first. We put our texture in there, and then we put the scoring lines in with some flats next to the edge radii so that we know that the edge radii is basically cut a 1-to-1 with the cutter that's being used. And then as we're cutting, we're inspecting, and if the cutter starts to wear out prematurely, we're going to throw it out. And it's only going to last so long too. So we're getting the best of both the upper end and the lower end. And the more that we inspect them, 100% we inspect, the more we inspect them, the more we can make sure that we're close to that upper limit. And it just gives us the ability to give the golfer the consistency in the most spin that they can have. Whether or not it's the first club that they buy or club 2 years later, they're going to know that they're going to get the best spin. And there's also a heat treatment process, like searing a steak, that it's going to harden those groove edges so that they last twice as long as if we wouldn't do it. So not only are they going to get maximum spin right out of the box, but rounds of golf later, 75 to 125 rounds later, they're only going to see a small amount of degradation.
And when you heat treat it, I think a lot of people think, well, oh, you're making it harder. Is that going to impact feel?
Not at all.
They still have a soft feel out there.
Right.
But yeah, the way you guys heat treat it, it's not something where you're making the whole head brittle or anything like that. It's a heat treatment process that will affect the grooves, but not affect the feel, correct?
Correct. It's just that very thin layer on top that just gets the scoring line edges so that it hits that ball, it bites it, but the middle is still as soft as we expect.
Yep. And then you mentioned, I mean, in terms of rounds played, 125 rounds is where you kind of see a lot of that performance fall off. On tour, those guys change out a little faster than 125 rounds.
Quite a bit
but
faster.
It still kind of plays a fact because, I mean, the best players in the world are probably practicing a lot more than us, and they're hitting a lot more wedge shots than us. But, in terms of the best players in the world, they're changing out those wedges at a certain point because they do want that consistency, right? And we should be doing the same thing, maybe just a slightly longer interval.
Absolutely. I think that the amateurs' needs are no different than ours, right? Sorry, the tour, that is. We need spin, they need spin, and it's my job to go on tour and make sure they have it. They change out wedges all the time. That's the beauty about participating in a leadership group that has a van, that has the materials and the resources needed to go out and help these guys manage that spin. That's the best way they can control the golf ball and play great golf. So we are constantly refreshing those grooves every single week, depending on how much practice, how many bunker shots, how much play. And for those players who live in climates where there's salty sea air, we're seeing decay on that as well. That salty air is going to cause these wedges to rust, and ultimately, you could see some decay over time with that. So I'm constantly spending time on the range making sure guys are sharp. But rule of thumb is we do a 1 through 4 system. Meaning if you're a 46, 50, 54, 58 player, so those 4 wedges, you're going to play 1 to maybe 2 46s, 1 to 2 50s or so, and then you're going to start to see those numbers increase as you start to increase the loft. So now you're at 3 sand wedges and 4 lob wedges, right? Everybody's a little different. A player like Justin Thomas, he would tell you I'd play this pitching wedge forever if he'd allow me to do so, but the reality is we have to maintain spin in certain lofts in certain ways, right? The higher the loft, the faster the spin decay will start to really show. And that's why we see significantly more lob wedges than we do gap wedges and pitching wedges. So constantly monitoring that is a big part of the job. And that gives our players the best ability to control that golf ball.
Yeah, and I mean, and you break it down to even an amateur level where, 125 rounds, I wish I could play 125 rounds in a year. Unfortunately, living up in Detroit, that's a little tough to do without some major travel. And, my wife's a very understanding woman when it comes to golf, but I don't know if I'm able to leave that for that long. But, 125 rounds, and people, I think, maybe look at that and say, well, it's just, trying to sell more wedges. But you start breaking it down and you think about hitting it close to the hole. And as that wedge and those grooves and they wear out and that ball gets further and further and further away from the hole, the percentage of making putts becomes less and less and less. So, 125 rounds, if you think about it, even for northern people like myself, it's a good amount of time.
It's a fair amount of golf. There's going to be practice in there as well. So, if you're mixing in range time and bunker sessions and, who knows? I know most of us are chipping off our carpets. But I think when you start mixing in all those little elements of practice and just time, that groove is wearing down. And when we go out on tour, we're not saying you have to replace everything all the time. That's not the goal. The goal is to put spin where it needs to be, right? The higher lofted wedges need that spin more often. You're going to get a very oblique strike. That ball's going to hit and slide and skid. It's going to go higher. It's going to carry shorter, and you're going to see less reaction on the greens. And that's really the focus, is just helping these players maintain that sub 30 launch number, that window that helps them control how that ball is going to react.
Yeah, no, it's it makes a lot of sense, and I think, like I said, even looking from my point of view at 125 rounds, that's going to take me at least 2 years.
This 10 years for Kevin and I.
Yeah, but they say if you want to play less golf, work in the golf industry.
That's it.
So, and then you get into, talking about performance, you get into grinds, and I know when you look at Vokey wedges over the years, if you look at probably the most options in golf, Vokey has the most sole options out there, and this year we're adding even more, which is kind of wild. So the Vokey SM10s, even a couple brand new ones. But why so many grinds? From the retail side, is it just we need to fit that many golfers? And tour side, we probably get it. There's a lot of different kind of ways people play and all that. But for the retail side, do we need this many grinds?
Yeah. You can correlate it to like shoes. It's what are you using it for, right? Each grind is specific to a person's swing type or where they play. The different lofts, right? What combination, 46, 50, 54, 58, or 52, 56, 60, whatever that is. Having an option is able to get them fit and able to play better golf. That's what we want. We want people to shoot lower scores. And providing the grind options, as many as we can, just allows them to feel confident that they haven't left any stone unturned. Just, I've tried them. These are the best for me. I feel confident they're going to shoot lower scores.
And it's amazing, too, what a grind will do to just even face contact. Because I know I was out there, I mean, I probably hit, in terms of 56, 60, and I hit probably every grind that you guys have. But it's amazing that you hit certain ones and you just kind of see, oh, wow, that was some, that's a great shot. And then other grinds, you kind of hit it and you go, it was okay. And you kind of narrow it down to, top 3 or top 2, and then you kind of move on. But talk a little bit, how does grind really affect strikes? Because, like I said, some I hit better than others, and it wasn't necessarily, all the high bounce ones I hit great and the low bounce ones I didn't. It was a little different, a little mixed in of which ones I hit great and which ones I didn't. So it wasn't necessarily just a number on the bounce of the sole.
So that's something we try and do, is just when we fit players, we fit them blindly, right? We don't want them to have a bias and I'm a low bounce guy, I'm a high bounce guy. That's not really the point of the whole process, right? The point of fitting is to expose them to different things so they can truly understand why a grind and a bounce works for them, right? From a fitter's perspective, as we run them through that process, we're identifying which one works best. So when we look at what's important with wedge fitting, grooves 2 through 5 is the hit location we want to locate.
Which is lower than I thought it should be. Like, I thought it should be higher up on the face. Just in general, I thought it should be center of the face.
I always think of, those iron sets we see from a long time ago that have that perfect dime on the middle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, that's the spot you want to be. And when you think about how that affects ball flight and trajectory, that essentially will give you the perfect combination of spin and launch and carry, right? Anything above that, you're going to start to see a diminishing return. That ball's going to go up. You're going to see some erratic spin numbers. You're going to see carries move back and forth. So making sure grooves 2 through 5 is your location, and you can do that with grind testing, that's going to give you the best ability to hit quality shots. Now, you have to take into consideration the type of turf you're on. Are you in a high moisture environment? Are you playing on Bermuda grass, bent grass, zoysia grass? All these little things go into understanding which ones are best for you. From the tour, once we identify what this perfect matrix is for them on 70% of the golf courses they play on, that's what they play. They don't change. When you go from Muirfield Village to St. Andrews in the summertime, that's when we see this massive shift. And that's where we have to start saying, okay, well, we got to make some changes here because you're not bottoming out in the right spots. You're hitting too low on the face. You're hitting too high on the face. Your spin numbers are all over the map. And that confidence is just gone, right? You lose the bottom, you lose the confidence, and now you're just trying to make pars wherever you can. So that's the important part. And that's why Kevin and his team have done such a tremendous job of saying, okay, we're going to up the SKUs this time. We're going to go from 23 to 25 because we know there's value in these additional offerings. We see it on tour every single week, and we know it works in the marketplace.
Yeah, and we have brand new, T grind in the 58 and then 54 in the M grind. Are the two brand new SKUs. So, and I think the 54 M grind is almost kind of a no-brainer. I think as iron lofts we've seen kind of shift a little bit stronger. I think 54 just opens more options for people to play that as a sand wedge. To have the M grind there, I think is a great option. Yeah, I mean, you get into all those SKUs, and yeah, you may look at it and go, wow, that's confusing as a just kind of consumer looking at a website or whatever. But you've got to use the online fitting tools and your in-person fitting tools as much as you can, because you guys do offer a lot of in-person fittings outdoors that I found even here. It's amazing what you can learn about your own game. Just having someone watch you hit some shots and handing you the tools and figuring out which works best, because it's kind of eye-opening. Even for me, it was hit a ton of wedges that the stuff that I was narrowing down to the two best, one of them was always something different than I thought it would be.
Right.
It was just wildly different.
Working with somebody or even an online fitting tool, the questions are the same.
Yeah.
Where you play, how you use each club, right? Tools in your garage, tools in the kitchen. Each one is specific to do something. With wedges, you can do a little bit of manipulating, but like you said, each grind is there for a reason. Adding the 54M back in the line adding a 58 low bounce, as you said, as pitching wedges have gotten lower lofted, that 50, 54, 58 combination is now more popular. So a 54-degree sand wedge and a 58-degree lob wedge and that lower bounce, it provides an extra option for that player depending on where they might play at St. Andrews every weekend. So
I wish. That'd be great. I wish that was my home course. That'd be great. But you're right. I mean, and then what is you guys' thoughts? Because I know some people talk about it, especially in the WRX forums. We're a little nerd here, but having kind of multiple wedge sets, 4 different setups. Are we getting too into the weeds, or is it something that is maybe viable? I mean, I know that myself at a poor 9 handicap, that's probably a little. I'm getting too into the weeds, and I should probably just stick with what works. But what are your thoughts about having or maybe just having like a different lob wedge for if you go play somewhere else?
Yeah, I think it goes with what Tour's going after. Your pitching gap wedges, I think they're pretty well served 99% of the time. Sand and lob is probably where if you from here to St. Andrews again, I may change or get into a different type of grass. Sometimes he's talking about grass. I mind usually green is what I'm playing on.
I just wanted to be green.
Grass color does not matter.
Being confident in what you have, given where am I going to play, what are the conditions going to be, how am I swinging right now? Do I have the money to go buy an extra wedge? Hey, if you do, it's going to make you play better golf. If you have the right tools, you will play better.
Yeah, and then finishes, awesome. We've got a brand new finish, which is pretty exciting. So we've got Sander, we've got Chrome, Tour Chrome, Jet Black, and now the new one, Nickel. Which is a pretty cool dark gray. How did this come about? How did Nickel come about? Because, I mean, these two we've seen in previous Vokey wedges, but Nickel, I don't think we've ever seen this before, have we?
Finish.
No, not in this particular version. It's every generation we come out with a wedge, it's kind of always like, do we need new finishes? And while I love looking at new finishes, testing them and getting them ready is really hard because you have standards and we have durability testing. I mean, it needs to represent Vokey. It needs to be durable. It needs to last. People need to feel good about it. This one was kind of like, you see the two sitting here. Can we get one that's in the middle? That'd be great. It's couple dozen, 3 dozen wedges later show up and we look at them all and we're like, this one looks really good. Well, 3 dozen permutations of it later is when we start to, oh, hey, this is starting, we go down this path, go down this path. It was just, looking at cars too. Hey, those matte gray ones are starting to look really nice.
Yep.
Motorcycle, right? The gas canister. It looks really good. How do we get something like that? And finally came together and we got something that's really good. It's durable. It's going to look great on the shelf. And we're really excited about this one.
No, I think it's going to be kind of I kind of like it more than the black, and I've always been kind of the dark finish, guy, and usually I would kind of lean towards the jet black, but the nickel is really cool. It's just because I think that little bit of texture to it, it just gives it, just something pops on it without really being flashy.
Right.
And it looked really, really good. The other thing I totally forgot to talk about, which I'm going to talk about now, a lot of the shaping. Because I know everybody, when they look, from SM7 to 8 to 9 to now 10, shaping always changes a little bit. There's always kind of this evolution. And 10, I know some things have maybe gotten a little smaller in areas. Some things have stayed the same. Overall, I think the shape's really good. I love it from address. But what can you talk about shape-wise and what's kind of changed with 10 coming from 9?
Yeah, so again, a lot of the feedback coming from Aaron and his players on tour and worldwide tour players. Just subtle things here and there, and working with Bob on profiles too he's always like, I've never made the perfect wedge. This is the time to do it. And then, hey, what are we going to do, Bob? And it's Bob working with Aaron and myself going, hey, what do we like? What do we not like? So two of the bigger changes, one is the toe profiles, a little bit more rounded, more symmetrical, kind of in the middle of the toe. They're going to look, when you put them down, it's going to look like, hey, that center of that toe is in the center of the club, and it looks right. Go along with that, the shorter or the Stronger lofts, 46 through 52, a little bit straighter leading edge, more similar to an iron. You know, it's more of a full club shot. And it's going to get progressively more rounded on the leading edge as we get to the higher lofts. Lob wedge, where you start manipulating the club more, so it doesn't. If it's straighter, it's going to look like it's pointed right. Now the club will look like it can perform in any situation. Another part is making sure that within a loft, 56 or 60, but every grind is going to look the same from address.
Yep.
It's kind of part of the fitting process, but also confidence that no matter what grind I pick or no matter what grind I'm getting fit for, when I put them down next to each other, they all look the same. It just so happened in years past how they were developed, there were some little subtleties to them that just made them change the way they look. Now we've made it so we've locked in a shape and then added the grind to it. So that now I'm just getting fit for grind, not going, this one looks better, I like that one better. So now they're all the same within a loft and just get fit for the grind.
And how does that help your job out on tour? I got to think us amateurs, at least us golf WRXers, are very picky about looks. But I got to think that, you know, the best players in the world have to be very picky about how something looks. So when Kevin's able to come to you and say, hey, here's a wedge that doesn't change the look, just the grind changes, does that kind of make your job a little bit easier when you hand these off to those players?
I usually give Kevin a hug right away. He gets a big hug and a thank you. And you know, the physical connection we have with the golf club, that's the first thing that we bond with, right?
Yeah.
Anytime you pull the club off the shelf, the first thing you do is you set it down, you look at it, and you go, okay, I like that, or you put it down and you go look for something else. One of the things that I think Bob has done so well in all the years of designing is he's figured out a way to make something look perfect, right? And as we work on these shapes together, we pick up on these little things, not just in our own meetings together, but when our tour players come to us and say, I love the shape, but I would love it if we could see this or we could change this. That information is immediately brought home, and I come to Kevin and I say, hey, can we maybe make a couple things and try this? And then I want to take it back out to tour and I want to have players look at it. I need to feel comfortable knowing that everybody who receives a wedge from me is exactly the physical look that they want it to be, right? And I'd say 80% of the players that I have the opportunity to work with say, I love everything about what you guys are doing here. This is great. It's the 20% who like that little touch, right? Maybe it's something a little different that the other 80% don't really see or are paying attention to. That's why we talk about symmetry in the toe sections, how we manage and monitor how much radius is on the leading edges based on lofts, you know, the par areas, the little things that your eyes would pick up on, that your eyes see all the time. Our tour players see the same things in different ways, but it's picking those top 20 players who are really discerning. They look at everything. I'm going to those guys first, and I'm asking them all the tough questions because they basically feed us the best information on how we can improve the visual parts of the package.
Yeah. And then, I mean, going to them with these, I got to think that, I know that we're recording this way early. This is going to be coming out for a while, this episode. But in terms of, I mean, the tour players you've talked to so far, I mean, I got to think that adoption is going to be pretty quick with SM10s.
I hope so. The team is working really hard right now.
Yeah, but say we're so early now. It's hard to say that the what's in the bags have been updated yet, but
these are really exciting and a little bit stressful times because we're really putting all of our energy into this. I believe these will be adopted quickly.
Yeah,
I think that players will put them in their bags immediately. I think that if they're not, it'll be a couple weeks time. They're going to set them down and go, yep, that's exactly what a Vokey looks like. I love what I'm looking at. They'll put them through the process of making sure they work in the bunkers, through the turf. You know, a lot of times for some, it's a sensitive period, right? It's the start of a season. They want to get off to a good start. They want to get that comfort going. So for some, it might be, give me a couple weeks to get to know them a little bit. And for a bunch of them, I imagine they'll go, yep, here we go. Yep. Let's go. Take the old one, send them home.
That's right. Yeah, I'm excited to get him out on the course. I mean, hitting in here is amazing. I mean, it's perfectly manicured, all that. I felt bad taking divots out there on the range, but yeah, for me, I mean, I think the kind of the 50 degree and the kind of the longer irons, I mean, they just look great to my eye. They flowed really well with the T150 irons that I'm playing. You know, go from pitching wedge into 50 degree. It just had a really seamless kind of look. But yeah, I'm going to end it with this. What's your SM10 setup right now? You got to go a little bit what's in the bag. What is your setup at the moment? I know we'd love to play more golf, but I know it's early.
Yep.
But what is the setup right now in your bag for SM10s?
4610F,
Okay.
5008F, 5414F, and 5808M.
Wow. All right. Oh, the 58M. All right. Aaron?
I have 4610F, 5008F, 5412D, and I got a little prototype in the bag.
Oh.
58L. So it's funny. We don't play a lot of golf. At least I don't. A lot of times I just go to the range and I'll try some stuff out. But I will change out the set 2-3 times a year to kind of get familiar with what Kevin's worked on in his design, because it's much easier for me to have that personal hands-on touch if I can have that conversation and have personal experience with it. So we'll change them out a little bit. I think I'll go to the M next. 58.
It's a good one.
I'm the same way. I like to hit everything, and that's why going out there and doing a fitting and being able to hit all the different grinds and kind of seeing how they compare to each other is such. Even if you're not as geeky as we are about these things, it's pretty interesting to see how they all perform differently, because I think so many people just look at the number at the bottom like, oh, 14 degrees of balance, that's too much for me. Right. Well, have you hit it yet? No, it's just too much. Well, it may play differently for you than you think, and it was really interesting because I'm typically a high bounce guy, and the T grind worked really well in the 60 for a while. It didn't end up being the final one, but I'm like, I usually was not a guy who looked at a T grind. A 4, it's a little intimidating to me in soft conditions and all that. So, definitely if you're looking for some SM10 wedges, please go to Titleist.com, set up a fitting. It's worth it. You'll have a blast. If anything, you'll just have a whole lot of fun hitting a bunch of different wedges. So, Aaron, Kevin, thank you so much. Appreciate all the time. It's awesome. Can't wait for these to actually hit shelves and get them in golfers' hands, because it's going to be a fun year with SM10 wedges. So thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.